Hey friends, hello and welcome back. In this video, we'll talk about stanza number 23, 24, 25 and 26 of Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. Let's begin with stanza 23. On some fond breast the parting soul relies, some pious drops the closing eye requires, even from the tomb the voice of nature cries, even in our ashes live their wonted fires. Wanted means usual or customary. Let us try to understand the exact paraphrase of these four lines. The parting soul relies on some fond breast. Closing eye requires some tears, pious drop. Even from the tomb, the voice of nature cries, even in our ashes leaves the spark of fire. See, the poet tries to tell that human beings need some sympathy. Dead person, whether important or not, should be paid tribute. Parting soul refers to dying breath. When a soul parts from the body, a person dies. A parting soul rests on the shoulder of someone who loves and is loved. Closing eye too is another expression for death. A dying person gets some satisfaction when he sees other weeping in sorrow for him. These things are natural to human beings. It is natural for human beings to see people feeling for them. Therefore, poet says that even from the tomb the voice of nature cries. The voice of nature here means the natural things for human beings. Poet wants people to notice the poor country churchyard people because they were humans and need things that all other human beings need. Let us try to understand this with the help of a few comprehension questions. 1. Where does a parting soul rely according to the poet? Parting soul relies on some fond breast according to the poet. What does a closing eye require according to the poet? A closing eye requires pious drop, that is, tear of grief according to the poet. What does cry from the tomb according to the poet? Nature's voice according to the poet cries from the tomb. Where do wanted fires live according to the poet? Wanted fires live in the ashes according to the poet. What do expressions parting soul, closing eye, tomb and ashes signify? The expressions parting soul, closing eye, tomb and ashes signify death. Let us move on to the next stanza, that is stanza number 24. For thee, who mindful of the unhonored dead, dost in these lines their artless tale relate, if chance by some lonely contemplation led, some kindred spirit shall inquire thy fate. See the meaning of difficult words. Mindful of is thinks of, relate is to connect, contemplation is thinking, and kindred is closely related, dear or blood relative, something like that. Let us try to understand the exact meaning of those lines. For you who thinks of the unhonored dead, people buried in country churchyard are the unhonored dead people here. For you who thinks of unhonored dead, relates their artless stories in these lines, and if chance is led by the solitary thinking, your fate too shall be thought about by some kindred spirit. Meaning, if you try to understand the stories of these unnoticed people buried in the country churchyard, someone like you will also read your story in the same way in future. In this stanza too, poet asks the people to feel sad for the dead country churchyard people and says that for you to some other person will feel sad in future when you are dead and buried at such place. For is because here. Because you who is mindful of the unhonored dead, people buried in the country churchyard are referred to as unhonored dead. A person who gives them importance can read their stories in the roughly written manner which is there on the gravestones. And there is a possibility that some other soul who would visit such a person's grave would talk about and become sad for this person's fate too. The kindred spirit here refers to the person of the same nature. Let us try to understand this too with the help of a few comprehension questions. One is, what would a person who thinks of unhonored dead find in letters written on the gravestones? A person who thinks of unhonored dead would find their stories in the letters written on the gravestones. Who would enquire about the fate of such a person? According to poet, some kindred spirit would enquire about the fate of such a person. Let us move on to the next stanza, that is stanza number 25. Haply, some hoary-headed swain may say, oft have we seen him at the peep of the dawn, brushing with hasty steps the dews away to meet the sun upon the upland lawn. Let us try to understand the meaning of a few words. Haply is perhaps, hoary is greyish-white, swain is country youth in archaic English, peep of dawn is dawn break, upland lawn is grassy land on the hill or the hilltop. Now let us understand the meaning of these 4 lines straight. Perhaps some country youth with white grey hair on his head may say, often we have seen at the daybreak brushing the dewdrops away from the grass while walking towards the sun on the grassy land on the hill, this man, the man whose poet talking about. See, poet has very beautifully captured the images of rising sun and person walking through the grassy land here. Rising sun looks as if it stays on the hilltop. The country youth would say that he had seen him walking towards the hilltop. It looks as if a person was walking towards the sun to meet him. When a person walks through the grassy land early in the morning, the dewdrops on the grass get brushed away by the movement of the feet. Here, poet tells that the country youth would speak of a person who is mindful of the dead country people after his death. Let us try to understand this too with the help of a few comprehension questions. Who is a hoary-headed swain? It's a country youth with white grey hair. What would a hoary-headed swain say about the person? The answer is, a hoary-headed swain may say that he had often seen this person in the morning walking towards the hilltop, and it looked like if he had walked to meet the sun. Now to stanza 26, last of this video. There, at the foot of yonder nodding beech, that rests its old fantastic roots so high, his listless length at noontide would he stretch, and pour upon the brook that babbles by. See the meaning of difficult words. Yonder is at some distance in a particular direction. Beech is a kind of tree. It's a big tree. Rests is views systematically. Listless length is tiredness. Noontide is time of noon or midday. Pour upon is study attentively, look carefully, or stare. Babbles by means makes sound while flowing over stones. It refers to the sound made by the water. Now let's understand the exact meaning of those lines. There, at the foot of beech tree, which rests its old fantastic roots so high, he would rest at noon and stare at the babbling brook that flows nearby. The tree, in fact. Okay. The stanza is continuation of earlier stanza in which poet imagines that a hoary-headed swain would tell the passerby about the poet or the speaker that he used to see this person at different places. He would tell the passerby that speaker would rest under the beech tree and stare at the brook at noontime. Nodding beech suggests the movement of the leaves of the tree due to wind. As the tree is at some distance from the place where the conversation would take place, the poet calls it yonder nodding beech. Beech is a large tree and it lives long. Its roots are woven into intricate design and look fantastic. Its design can be seen on the surface of the land. You can see it in the picture too. Therefore, poet uses the line that rests its old fantastic roots so high. His listless length would he stretch means he would stretch under the tree because of the tiredness at the noontime. And he would also attentively look, pour upon his attentively look at the brook which flows there. Babbles means makes sound. As the water flows over the stones, it creates sounds. Now, again, try to understand it with the help of a few comprehension questions. Where would the speaker stretch his listless length at noontide? Of course, at the foot of the beech tree. How is beech tree described? It is described as nodding. How are the roots of the tree described? They are described as wreathed fantastically on the surface. What would the speaker stare at? Speaker would stare at the brook. Where is the brook? Brook is nearby the beech tree. Hope you've understood these 3 stanzas. Thank you very much for watching.